Hi, everybody. Ian Bremmer here. I want to talk for just a moment about the U.S.-China relationship. Adversarial, lacking in trust, but also more stable, and this year, much more engaged with some phone calls, with a successful Trump visit to China, meeting with Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping planning on coming to the United States for a state dinner. Summits as well, multilateral summits that both will be attending. A lot of effort and ability for these two leaders of the two most powerful countries in the world to spend some time. President Trump even referring to the meeting as a G2. Xi Jinping not interested in taking that up, but enjoying the framing that these are the leaders that are the most consequential. They're the countries that have the most impact. That's why he spoke of a Thucydides trap and wanting to avoid one when Trump went to visit him in Beijing. I mention this because when we talk about the U.S.-China relationship, we're most frequently talking about the economic relationship, the trade, the critical minerals and rare earths, the semiconductors that the Americans are not giving the most advanced versions to China, the inputs and the manufactured goods that the Chinese send to the United States, soybeans from the U.S., Boeing planes from the U.S., Chinese electric vehicles getting made all over the world. That's why Volkswagen just said they're firing 100,000 employees. But the Americans are not going to have the Chinese producing EVs in the U.S. Fentanyl. I mean, there's Taiwan. There are a lot of issues that we've been discussing, and yet perhaps the two most important have really not been on the agenda. And if you wanted to make a difference globally, you would try this. And there are two things I think that the Americans and the Chinese should be talking about more than they are. First is Russia and the Ukraine war. Everyone knows this war has been going on for way too long. It's costing an immense amount in terms of lives. It's doing a lot of damage. And it's also increasingly isolating the Russians from everyone in the West. Putin's decision after assuring European leaders that he was not going to invade, trying to take this country out, instead building the strongest military in Europe that is oriented at trying to ensure that the Russians are defeated. And if there are two leaders in the world that might together be able to convince Putin that he should stop this, and stop this not being surrender, stop this not being admit defeat. No one would expect Putin to actually do that. But stop this being accept a ceasefire without preconditions. The same ceasefire without preconditions that Zelensky previously refused to accept, and then with pressure from Trump said he would accept. Freezing the line of conflict, exchanging prisoners of war, and allowing for constructive diplomacy, the long, arduous process to begin. The United States is the most powerful country in NATO, which is presently sending an awful lot of weapons through Europe to Ukraine, providing a lot of intelligence, allowing the Ukrainians to hit deep targets inside Russia, so causing a lot of damage to the Russians. And yet the only American president that the Russian president would have any shot of getting anything done with. He's the guy that invited him to Anchorage, offered him the ride in the Beast, wanted to do a deal and be seen as a peacemaker, and was willing to pressure Ukraine, even suspend intelligence support for a couple of weeks when he threw Zelensky out of the White House, said he didn't have the cards. Then you've got Xi Jinping, who is Putin's friend and trusted strategic partner, even ally. And they see each other on birthdays, and they travel and engage with each other a lot. China's economy and technology is utterly essential to Russia. Their willingness and ability to buy lots of Russian energy. They vote with the Russians and support the Russians, not only at the Security Council, but in other manners of diplomacy, the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the BRICS, you name it. If the Americans and the Chinese were both willing to engage with Putin together, to put some pressure in an environment of we're not taking you to the woodshed. We just need this war over. This war is bad for everyone, but most of all you, sir. That is the only shot that I would see of potentially avoiding Putin driving his country into a ditch. And on almost every front, Russia is heading for disaster, and it's all on this guy's watch. So if you want to avoid that, and I think you do, the Ukrainians aren't going to surrender, and they don't need to, and the Europeans aren't going to stop supporting them, and they don't need to. It would require the Americans and the Chinese, and China with a pragmatic sense of wanting stability for the long term, and Trump in a personal sense of wanting credit for ending the war. This is really something that they should be prioritizing, and they haven't. So that would be top of my agenda in the near term. Other point on my agenda is AI. The United States and the Chinese are the two countries that dominate AI presently. Chinese companies that are mostly controlled by the government, and American companies that mostly capture the regulatory process in the US, nonetheless driving the most advanced large language models, which are going to be extraordinary for productivity gains, new inventions, expanding our life expectancy, improving education, changing human capital and what it means to be human, how our society functions, all of those things. The Americans and the Chinese dominate them, but also the dangers in developing bioweapons, the dangers in exploiting cyber vulnerabilities, the dangers in launching fleets of drones, and developing advanced weapon systems that will undermine the national security of everyone around the world, including the US and China itself. It is utterly essential that the Americans and Chinese begin a process of AI arms control, like the Americans and the Soviets did, but only after 1962 and the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was frankly a little late. You don't want to wait until there's after a crisis. Now, you don't need trust in order to do that. You don't need to be friends and allies. You just need a sense of mutual desire to continue to survive and thrive as countries. I know we're in a GZERO world, and I know we lack global leadership, and I know that there's way too much short-termism, and there are all too many things that are dominating the near-term agendas of these leaders. There's politics that gets in the way of everything, but this is the geopolitical priority that these two leaders, as misaligned on so many things as they may be, should engage. And the fact that they are willing to spend a fair amount of time together and at least publicly show that they like each other and they have some mutual respect for each other, or at least understand that the other can do a lot of damage, and so therefore they need to behave well, creates more opportunity to be constructive on things that are truly in the interests of both countries. And these two things are very truly in the interests of these two countries and, frankly, pretty much everybody else. So that's a thought for me. I'll talk to y'all real soon. Be good.